Three division heads. So this is going to be just super informal. I have slides here, things that that we can talk about. But if you have other things you want to talk about, bring them up, and we will. This is just a kind of a general parenting presentation. Things that I think are real important, according to what I've read and my experience and so forth. There might be some of you or some other people who would disagree with me. But I brought a book that I really like because I put some resources at the end of this. But The Parents We Mean to Be by Richard Weisford. He's a Harvard psychologist guy I really like. One of the reasons I really like him is I agree with him. So we'll get going and we'll stop anytime you want. Okay, these questions, these are kind of tongue-in-cheek, little bit facetious, but sometimes in our best efforts to do the right thing, we are doing the wrong thing. We are reinforcing the thing that we don't want. And so, the answers to all these are obvious, right? As far as what would a healthy parent want. But sometimes the results are not always exactly as we planned. So we're just going to look at a few things here real quickly and then talk about them more specifically. So you're all parents. You all know it takes guts. You have to be willing to stand up for your kid and stand up to your kid. Both of those things. Hard work, coping skills, self-control. You have to take risks and have failures just like your kid does. And you are the model. We know that parents are the primary shapers of kids' moral lives. Okay? They are. It's not their peer group. It's not their teachers. Parents are the primary shapers of kids' character. And all done with love, of course. So Eleanor Roosevelt is someone I really like. I've read lots of biographies of Eleanor Roosevelt. I find her to be a very interesting person. But this is one quote of hers that I really like. The easiest way to make it hard for our children is to make it easy for them. So what's a parent to do? Okay, these, well. Isn't that interesting? Can you look at Patrick?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so things that we want to instill in our kids, independence. We want them to have their eyes on something more than the fact that they want to be liked. In other words, we want them to be independent thinkers. We want them to make their own decisions. Hard work. I think we all want our kids to learn how to work hard to achieve what they want. Responsibility. So to be able to fulfill responsibilities, fulfill expectations. Self-confidence. We want them to have true self-confidence, not some shallow kind of self-confidence. Goodness, in a few minutes we're going to talk about goodness and the difference between goodness and happiness, which I think is an interesting thing to think about. To be selfless and to be compassionate. So we want our kids to be able to focus on others, to find that larger target than themselves and their own desires, their own sense of, happiness and comfort. And another quote I have on the slide that's not up there is, prepare your child for the road, not the road for your child.
He's coming, the person who got it.
It has to be open. Well, maybe that's the problem, because it was going for a while. Yeah. All right, let's see. Hey. Okay. So the last thing, Patrick, there's that last slide. So let's drill down a little bit on some of these things. So independence, how do you do that? How do you foster independence in your kids? We try to do this at school, and I know most of you try to do this at home. Require them to do what they can do. If they can tie their shoes, don't tie their shoes for them. If they can make their bed, don't make their bed for them. In other words, require them to do what's reasonable for them to do and that they can do. Don't overschedule. This is a problem, a growing problem, I think, in our society, that we have kids whose calendars look worse than yours and mine. And what ends up happening is kids' days are scheduled by adults and adult-led activities all day, every day. And I don't think that's a good thing. I think kids need to be in charge of some of their own time. They need to make up some of their own activities. They need to have a chance to discover a passion or to be creative in their play or to play in the street, in the neighborhood, whatever. I think if we want our kids to be independent, then we as adults can't be directing their every move. We need to have them learn how to do that. Hey, parent peer pressure. So this is a real thing, right? Your kid wants to play soccer, and the other parents say, well, if your kid's not playing soccer by the time they're 3, they're not going to make it to school team. They're not going to be able to play in high school. They're not going to, And so it's a real thing. And I think sometimes we need athletics is one area, but it happens in all areas. I think sometimes we need kind of a reset in our society about, come on, this is not professional sports. This is, what do you want our kids to get out of this? Fun, exercise, some skill development, those kinds of things. Allowing spouse time, adult time for you and your spouse. One important thing that your child should know is that your primary relationship is with your spouse. That they are not your primary relationship. That that relationship with your spouse is the primary relationship. And then to provide your kid with choices. And it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be choices that you lose if they make a choice. Like, it doesn't have to be, you want to clean your room or not. It could be, would you like to clean your room this morning or this afternoon? So you win no matter what, but they still get a choice. So encouraging autonomy. As parents, we don't like to see our kids struggle. We don't like to see our kids fail. Our tendency is to step in, to fix it, to help, to rescue them quickly, and that's probably the wrong thing, unless they're running out from a car or something. Then rescuing them quickly would be a great idea. But let them struggle. Let them figure it out. Let them have some mistakes. Let them have some disappointment. That's where they learn. And actually, we'll talk about this a little bit later too. That actually builds self-esteem. When you step in to rescue your child too quickly, the subtle message you're giving them is, I know you can't do this on your own, so I'm going to help you. And when they struggle and get to a conclusion, get to an answer on their own, that builds self-esteem. Then they feel like, I can do this. I made it. You want to respect their really listen to them, hear what they're saying to you, see what they want you to know. Not that it's always going to be something you're going to go along with or agree, but listen to them, and keeping expectations realistic. You know, I think about just chores. You know, giving kids chores that they can do. Now, they might not do it quite as well as you would, but they should do it, and you should not redo it. So they learn to take that responsibility. So for hard work and responsibility. So I am a big believer in chores. I think every kid ought to have chores at home, starting when they're 3. And there are chores that kids can do when they're 3. They can set the table. They can empty the trash in the bathroom. They can unload the dishwasher or load the dishwasher. Whatever the chores, but it's important for them to have chores. They have a stake in your family then. They are a contributing member of your family, and their job is important. And it should be an expectation. Well, the last thing I have on here is about allowance. I'll talk about that a little bit right now. If you're going to give your child an allowance, which I like, you have to decide what the purpose of that allowance is. If it's to teach your child to manage money, which would be my purpose, then they have to have a regular income, okay? So if you're going to tell them, you get $5 a week for an allowance, and here's what you have to use that, I'm not going to give you money for a candy bar when we go to the store, or whatever it is your child wants. If you have money, you can buy that with your money. And so if you're going to outline for them, this is money to be used on these things, I'll supply your clothing, your meals and all that, then they have to have a regular expected income in order to be able to learn how to manage it. So, it's hard. I think it's a lot harder than when my kids were little, because when I gave them allowance, I gave them cash money, and I would suggest, even very few of us deal in cash right now, I would suggest when you give your kid an allowance, you deal in cash. And you can teach them about making wise choices, spending. You can teach them about saving, and you can teach them about giving. So when my kids were little, each of them had a bulletin board in their room with 3 envelopes on it, and one said spending, one said saving, and one said charity. And they knew that our requirement as a family was at least 10% of their allowance had to go in the charity one, at least 15% had to go in the savings one, and everything else could go in the spending one, or they could also up those other 2. And I had one kid that saved almost every penny he ever got. I mean, I could borrow money from him anytime. He never spent any money. I had another one who, for a long time, it was gone. It was gone, and then he started saying, well, why does my brother have these things and I don't? Because your brother saves up and buys a big thing. You spend all your money every week. And he started to figure that out a little bit. I don't think kids should be paid an allowance for doing their regular chores. I think that's an expectation as part of the family, just like you have your things you have to do at home. I think it's entirely reasonable to pay your kids for doing things outside of that. Like we paid our kids for things like washing the car, mowing the grass. Oh, we paid our kids to be our maid. Our oldest son came up with that idea. He's like, how much do you pay someone to clean the house? And I told him, and he's like, well, I will do it for less than that. And I said, okay. And so I made them a little index card for each room in the house. Aside from they had to each keep their own bedrooms and bathrooms, but for the public areas of the house, these things have to be done. He did a great job on that. He carried around those cards, checked them off, cleaned the house. I paid him, and he saved a lot of money. And the reason he quit that job was because he actually opened an investment account when he was in 6th grade with the help of my father, and also started an African pygmy hedgehog business. And then cleaning the house was not good enough for him. And my second son said, well, I'm going to clean the house now. I'll do it. I'll take that job. You pay me. You know, I fired him in about a week because the quality was not good. I'm like, nope, you're not getting paid for doing a subpar job. But go ahead. Well, I was going to say they need maybe a way to earn money that if they have a bigger aspiration. You know, at Sycamore, some of you know, some of you don't know yet, that in middle school we take some big overnight field trips, and those are an additional charge aside from tuition. And our deal with our kids was when those field trips came around, they had to earn half the money for those field trips. And so really it was our money, right? Because we provided them, a 12-year-old or a 10-year-old can't go out and get a job, but we provided them with ways to do that. So they had a vested interest in that.
You've been reluctant to talk about money. What age do you think it becomes?
We started allowances for our kids when they were 6. And increased it each year with their age, and also renegotiated each year what that should be used for. Like when our kids were in high school, we still gave them an allowance, but we did not, we gave them enough allowance that if they wanted to buy lunch at school, they could out of that. But we didn't give them separate lunch money. So they had a choice. They could make their lunch and take it to school and have that money, or they could buy their lunch at school. And I have 3 sons. We had both things occur. You know, some of them were like, oh, taking the lunch to school, that is not cool. So we're like, heck yeah, I'm gonna take my lunch for free and not, so, but I think the earlier the better, really. Have them get a sense of money. Kids, again, it's our kind of cashless society. Our kids have no sense naturally of what money means. How they see their parents as an ATM sometimes. They think there's an endless supply of this thing we call money, and I just have to ask mom and dad. And I think they need to start getting some perspective on what things cost and how you have to make decisions based on what you have and what things cost, and that don't give them a lot of stuff. I believe in strongly. I think most of our families here are pretty affluent, right? I think just because you can does not mean you should. I think we ought to be pretty stingy with our kids. We indulged our kids on their birthdays and at Christmas. And any other time that they wanted money, it had to be money that they saved or money they received as a gift or whatever. So they would not have this sense of, all I have to do is ask, I'm entitled to whatever I want, those kinds of things. And I think appropriate expectations, consequences for not doing their chores, and like our rule, we had every other Saturday at our house, we had house cleaning weekend. That was not a popular day. But on the off weekends, we didn't clean the house on the weekends. We just played. But on house cleaning weekends, the rule was you have to clean your room and your bathroom before you do anything else. If you want to go out and play, fine, but not till that's done. And the consequence then was natural. They didn't have it done. They missed out on whatever else they had planned for the day. And that's, sometimes you feel kind of like a Grinch doing that, but I think it's great. I think it's a great lesson. So, encouraging risks, stretching kids, we know that in learning, our brains work better when we're making mistakes. So you want to stretch your kids. Let them try something that's hard. Let them fail. Let them learn from it. Let them do a better job next time. So many kids, so many gifted kids are scared of risk. They're perfectionistic and they don't want to take those risks. You've got to normalize that. You've got to make that okay for kids to take a risk and see that their world does not fall apart when something totally fails. And this whole thing I was talking about a little bit earlier, avoid removing burdens and disappointments. As much as your kid can solve their own problems, deal with their own stressors, their own disappointments without you stepping in, I think is the healthiest thing to do. This last one, if a kid comes home and says to you, well, so-and-so pushed me on the playground and the teacher didn't even do anything about it, my question to my kid, your urge is, I'm going to call that teacher, or I'm going to call that kid's parents, right? What I would do, my question to my kid would be, what do you plan to do about that? And then they can decide, is it important enough that I'm going to follow up on this? And if so, how? What should I do? Or is this really no big deal and I'm just whining to mom and dad? So I think just putting them in the driver's seat as much as you can is really important. Stretching them, hard jobs. I remember once, my two older kids for a while slept in bunk beds. And I remember the younger one was on the top, and he was in maybe kindergarten. And if your kids have ever had bunk beds, they are a pain to try to make the bed. And I didn't want to do it, but I wanted to require my kids to make their bed. And so he was kindergarten, and he was up there on the top bunk, and he was making the bed, and he did a pretty good job of it. And he said to me, Mom, I actually like making my bed. And I said, really? Why? And he said, because it makes me feel like an adult. And so he felt, that sense of responsibility in doing that. This is something that Weisford talks a lot about in this book. Excessive praise. Your kids should not receive praise for every little thing they do. They ought to be able to have some kind of self-reinforcing system where they don't need your affirming words for, oh, good job brushing your teeth. Oh, you got in the car on time. Nice job. No, those are expectations. Those are not big achievements. And I think, over praising our kids, they realize how empty that is, and they have more trouble distinguishing between what's important and what's not. Like if you're gonna praise them for every little thing, how do they know when they've really done something good? So I think that's important to decision making, problem solving. Let's say your kid wants to do 5 summer camps, and you're like, no, we're not doing 5 summer camps, but you can do 2. How are you going to decide which ones you want to pick? And then you can give them some tools to help them decide that, but let them pick. Assuming they're all okay with you, let them make that decision. Give them the responsibility for their own decisions. It's very hard for them to back if you make the decision for them, it's very easy for them to come back to you and say, well, you made me do that and it was no good. You know, if they've made the decision, it's their decision and they live with it. Okay, this is something that I really like. Weisborg talks a lot about this. He's done a lot of studies on happiness. 50 years ago, when college kids were asked, would your parents rather you be happy or good? The answer was good. They want me to be a good person. Now the answer is overwhelmingly happy. My parents want me to be happy. And that's when your goal for your kid is happiness, when their goal is happiness, what that tends to make them be very self-focused, which, if you think like I do, you want your kid to be other-focused, you want them to be empathetic, compassionate, you want them to be able to put themselves in others' shoes. And this ties back into that whole thing about self-esteem as well. Historically, happiness has come through suffering. People come through hardship to discover happiness. When that is the whole goal, then there's no struggle, there's no achieving, there's not that value to self-esteem that is there when they have some kind of suffering, and suffering maybe, but disappointment, struggle, that they can then achieve happiness. Self-esteem. So this, there's some research about this too. Self-esteem doesn't deter violence, drug use, all of those things. In fact, leaders of gangs, so forth, mostly have very high self-esteem. And you're not doing your kids any favors by trying to build up this false sense of self-esteem. You want to build up their moral character. You want them to be, or I should, in my opinion, want them to be good people, contributing people. This last one, because it's the right thing for us to do, for our collective good, for everyone, for us to be looking out for the well-being of others. That quote from John Stuart Mill I like too, those only are happy who have their minds fixed on some object other than their own happiness. I think this is really interesting research on goodness versus happiness. And it's something worth really thinking about, I believe. So as parents, you want to do all these things that you're asking your kids to do. You want to be the moral exemplars. You want to be a good model for them. You want to care for other people. Appreciation, this ability to value other people and know other people and appreciate other people is kind of the heart of all moral motivation. Can your kid see that a elderly neighbor is struggling when they're trying to carry their groceries in the house? And can your kid make a decision, I'm going to go help that person because I see her and she's struggling. Not that you said, hey, why don't you go help her? But your kid will come to those conclusions if they've seen you do that over and over and over again. Same thing with giving to charity, giving to causes that you believe in, whether it's in service or financially. Your kids see you doing that over and over and over again. That's going to be part of the way they think. It's just you are their North Star on all this stuff. Thank you notes calls expressing appreciation, expressing gratitude, basic manners, for heaven's sakes, being polite, looking people in the eye, thanking people. Our rule at our house for thank you notes when you got a gift was you can't use the gift or have the money until the thank you note's in the mail. And it could also not be a 1 or 2 sentence thank you note. I'm sure if you all are like me, you've received thank you notes from brides that say, I really appreciate the sheets. Thanks. To me, that doesn't pass muster in our house for a thank you note. It has to be a good paragraph, really expressing gratitude. And nowadays, I mean, my kids were little, we didn't do email so much, but nowadays you can decide, is it okay to do it by email, or do you want your kids to really handwrite a thank you note? My boys now are all in their 30s, they're all adults, and I have had people say to me, people in my generation, who for whatever reason have received a thank you note, your son writes the best thank you note. And I'm like, yeah, because he knows he'll be in trouble if he didn't. But just that focus outside yourself. That person did something nice for me. They deserve my gratitude. I want to show appreciation to them. I think oftentimes there is too much emphasis on our own happiness, which kind of displaces our responsibility for others. I mean, we have some responsibility to other people in this world, and I think too much focus on our own happiness and too much focus on your kids' happiness can make your kids fragile. I think it can make them entitled. I think it can make them kind of conformist, not really thinking independently. So we talked about these things actually. Just I think this is real important. Kids to learn that delayed gratification. They want something, we don't provide it immediately. They can figure it out. They can work for it. They can wait for it. They can save for it. They can wait for their birthday, whatever. But it doesn't just appear by virtue of the fact that they want it. All of our kids, when they were young, little, elementary school, we told them, when you're 16, you get your driver's license, we're not going to buy you a car, just so you'll know. And we will buy you a car that is worth twice the amount of money you've saved. So if you've saved $3,000 for a car, we will match that, and you can buy a $6,000 car. But you are going to be vested in this. And they knew this from the time they were little, so they knew that they could be putting money away for this day. And they all bought cars when they turned 16, and they were all, our requirement was that they'd be running and that they'd be safe. And they all did that, and but they had earned and saved half the money for that car. I think to just have your kids expect that you are going to give them everything they want right when they want it is dangerous territory. So just this service, this obligation, I think it's important to have conversations with your kids before they join a team or a club or something about their commitment to that team. It shouldn't be a surprise to them that if they say, oh, I don't like this anymore, I want to quit. It shouldn't be a surprise when you say, well, you've got to finish the season that you signed up for because your team is depending on you. But I think that conversation needs to be had before they sign up. So you realize you're not trying this out for one game or 1 week. You're committed. You're making a commitment to a team, and you have to see that commitment through, whether you end up loving it or not. Okay, mistakes to avoid. What's your preventive? You may think that sounds kind of wild, but and it may be a little bit of an exaggeration, but your kid needs to know that you are a person without them. That you are a person yourself. You do not depend on them to make you whole. You do not, need them to define your life. And that means you have your own activities. It means you go out on your own, and they're not included. They are not. They should not expect to be a part of everything you do as adults. They should understand that they are children, you are adults, and there's a difference there. Believing your kids are perfect, we all try not to do that. I think it's hard sometimes, but you need to check yourself when your first reaction, when the first time someone tells you that your kid lied to them, you need to check your reaction if it's, my kid doesn't lie. Because, oh yeah, they do all the time. I mean, And so, so you just need to be able to see your kids as clearly as you can. Living vicariously through them. So, if you love soccer, doesn't mean your kid is going to. And if you hate baseball, your kid may love it. This relates to this last one. You need to raise the child you have, not the child you want. And if you never got to play soccer, tennis, whatever, if you never got to be in the band, whatever, that's not a valid reason for pushing that on your child, because your child is a different person from you. Wanting to be our child's best friend. I promise you, if it hasn't happened already, at some point, your child will say to you, I hate you. They all say that, I hate you. I can't you say, well, you are ridiculous. You're ridiculous. And it's like, oh, well, I think I'm doing pretty well then, but it's, you have to be strong to not, you can go in your room and like fall apart, but you have to be the parent, not be the buddy of your kid. And not, so competitive parenting, you know what that's like. I mean, it gets crazy sometimes. Oh, my child won this award, this competition. So what? This quote from Einstein I really like. Not everything that is counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted. There are much more important things than the trophy or the certificate or the blue ribbon or whatever. And just, it's hard. I know it's hard to try to just not get sucked into that parental competition that exists, and not miss the wonder of childhood. You enjoy your kid, have fun with your kid. Another cautionary note I would say on that, missing the wonder of childhood, is enjoy it more than take pictures of it. I mean, I feel bad sometimes when I see parents that are so intent on documenting everything about their child's birthday party or whatever it is, that they never got to have any fun at the party. They didn't get to enjoy the moment. And so I think, it's fun. Raising kids, it's hard, but it's fun. And so you want to enjoy it. Forgetting that our actions speak louder than words. Kids have the best hypocrite detector in the world. They will say, but I thought you said, you're at the theme park, you're at Disney or something, and you're like, you're like buying a child's ticket for a kid that has just turned 13 or whatever the age is, and because they're little and nobody ever, and they're like, well, isn't that lying? You know, I mean, they pay attention, and what you do, they're going to remember. They're going to remember what you do, and it's a lot more important than what you tell them. They're watching you. They're watching you all the time, all the time. Also, I think you have to get out of this habit of judging other kids or other kids' parents. It comes a little bit from that competition, I think, you know, from wanting to be better at something. And I think just we for sure don't want our kids to, I think that's mine, don't want our kids to hear us judging another kid's. I can't believe his parents let him act that way. Well, you don't know what the reality is for that parent, and if it's okay for you to say that, it's okay for your kid to say that. They're going to be saying that as well. Underestimating character, moral character is so important. It's the foundation of everything we are, and I think we see plenty of examples of the lack of it. And I think, you know, the most important work we can do with our kids is developing their character, developing that gratitude, appreciation, their ability to think of others is so important. And mistaking giftedness for maturity. So all your kids are really bright kids, and you're in a conversation with them, and it's real easy to just start having this conversation with them like they're an adult, because they have the vocabulary, they have the knowledge base, all that. What they don't have is the experience and the social and emotional maturity to do that. There are conversations that I don't care how bright your kid is, they're not ready for when they're 8, 10, whatever. You need to. It's hard. It's hard as teachers and as parents to not get kind of fooled into thinking it's a little adults here I'm talking about. So let's have a conversation about nuclear war. Let's have a conversation about that dirty bomb in Ukraine and what could happen. They can't deal with that. They might be able to understand all about the facts of the war, the political issues, but they have no earthly idea how to cope with the thought of that. And so we have to be careful that we're not making that mistake. These are just a few sources that I really like. This is one right here, the last one we have on there. The 2 by Wendy Mogul, The Blessing of a Skinned Knee and The Blessing of a B-. Those are both about making mistakes and how important they are. Raising an Emotional, Intelligent Child is really a good one. And How Children Succeed by Paul Tuck. That's about grit and about perseverance and the importance of that in your child's life. So that's all I have prepared. Do you have other topics or questions about any of these that you want to bring up? Things you want to talk about? Yeah.
Allowing questions. So I just started, or she just started a kids checking account.
Okay.
And with that, it's actually on it. There's an app, and you can put in chores, and they can mark them off.
Oh, great.
Request payment towards time, all that. My struggle is the balance between her earning her allowance. It's like there's caveats. So she has these things to do every week. but she may neglect other things, like picking up your clothes, like that's an excellent thing, picking up your clothes, or cleaning the table after you eat, but she does.
So you're saying she might not do these basic expectations, but choose instead to do the things that she gets reimbursed for.
Yeah, and it's like, I don't, consciously she's not doing that, but it's like, okay, you still, it's like a balance. Like,
Well, I would say you could think of whatever your basic expectations are, that you have to do these things every day. That's anything else is a non-starter.
right.
I would say you can't even access any of that until the basic requirements are satisfied. That's your gateway into this account. And then, you can check off the things that you do earn money for, but I would make that just a foundation, like, unless this is satisfied, nothing else matters. Anything else?
The question around academics and things, encouraging them to pursue excellence, and how do you balance that? For every A you get this, but don't want to create. You want to create that self.
I mean, that's over a long time. That's, kids. So when they do something and do it well, they innately get reinforced, and they know when they do something well and when they don't. And if they get praised for something they have not worked hard on and not done well on, then all bets are off. But they can learn. I would never give kids rewards for grades. I think there's so many pitfalls there. Now, I will say, when I was a kid, the Dairy Queen in our town gave rewards for grades. I'm not kidding. Like, if you got straight A's, you got a banana split. You better believe I was hightailing it to the Dairy Queen. But I don't like making that connection, because ideally you want that grade to be a reflection of learning, not something that earns you or doesn't earn you a reward. But it's something that you just have to build over time, I think, that just praising their hard work more than their product, about seeing how hard they work on something, not how does it turn out. Because, I remember once here, a long time ago, when I was lower school head, third graders had done some projects. I think it was on their poetry project. They had a big display in the hall of their, whatever they'd done to go along with their poem, the diorama or the poster or whatever project they'd done. And after school one day, I heard two fourth graders going down the hall, and they were looking at these, and they were going along and going, kid, parent, kid, and they were like, no way, kid did that. I mean, that happened, and they know, and the kids who do it themselves, not only do they learn more, but they get more. A kid whose parent does a project for them or does a lion's share of it, they get no satisfaction out of that at all, because it's like, my mom had to do it because I couldn't, or whatever, and they need to be held accountable. I'll tell you what, I had two boys, seniors in high school, that former students of mine. I had them when they were in 5th and 6th grade. They came to visit me here when they were graduating from high school, and one of these guys, I had taken over this class, mixed 5th and 6th grade class of 50 kids in November, because the teacher had walked out because this was such a mess of a class. And we had, in our literature class, we had read the great Billy Hopkins. I'll never forget this. They were required to do a project. They had like 3 weeks notice. It should have been a really big project. They'd seen the rubric on how he was going to evaluate it. This one kid brought in a mess, something he'd obviously thrown together the night before, and he got an F on it, and he threw a fit, you know, I don't deserve an F, you know, I'm going to have my mother come in and talk to you, and, you know, and I said, I'll be glad to talk to mother. Anyway, the point is that kid was one of the kids who visited me here when he was senior in high school. And he said to me that day, by the way, I really did throw that Gilly Hopkins project together the night before and it was worthless. I mean, they know. But I think we do have to be careful not to teach you know, it's one of the hardest questions in education, I think, reward systems. Intrinsic versus extrinsic, how much is too much? I mean, it's a hard question.
You guys get how many people that in school to make sure that we're slacking, let's just say, but it's not all about them.
Right. So it was different with each of my kids because they were different personalities and different kids. We mostly were really hands off. I will say my husband, because he's kind of like a big kid in some ways, and like they would be, I heard my kids tell my husband more than once, Dad, this is not your project. This is my project. Because he would be like, oh, why don't you do this? Oh, why don't you do this? They'd be like, hands off, you know. And I think a certain amount of stubbornness helps there. But allowing your kid to do that, I'd say, yeah, it's not mine. You're right. Anything else you want to talk about? Thank you for coming today. I appreciate it. And it was recorded, and so Patrick will be sending out a link to post on our YouTube channel. And, so people that couldn't come can see it if you guys want to refer back to it.